Hey there, today we're going to talk about something super important but not always easy to understand: self-love. But don't worry, we'll break it down in a way that's simple and fun. So what is self-love? Well, self-love means liking yourself just the way you are. It's about taking care of yourself, being kind to yourself, and believing that you're special even when things don't go perfectly. Why does self-love matter? Imagine trying to ride a bike with flat tires. It's really hard, right? That's what life can feel like without self-love. When you love yourself, it's like having strong, pumped-up tires that help you glide through life more smoothly. It helps you feel happy, makes your relationships better, and even helps you do well in school or work. In this video, we'll dive into what self-love really means, how it's been talked about for a long time, and why it can be tough sometimes. We'll also look at some tricks to help you build self-love and keep it strong, so make sure you keep up and watch until the end. Ready? Let's go. 1. Historical and philosophical origins of self-love. Let's take a trip back in time to ancient Greece, where a smart guy named Aristotle talked about self-love. Aristotle believed there were two kinds of self-love. The good kind helps you grow and be a better person. But there's also a selfish kind, where you only think about yourself and forget about others. Aristotle thought it was super important to love yourself in the right way because it helps you make better choices and live a good life. But it wasn't just the Greeks. In old religious books, people talked about self-love too. For example, in Christianity, there's a saying that goes, "Love your neighbor as yourself." This means you should care about others just as much as you care about yourself. So even way back then, people knew that loving yourself is important. Now, fast forward to the Middle Ages. During this time, many people thought self-love was kind of dangerous because it could turn into pride, which they thought was a big no-no. But then came the Renaissance, a time when people started thinking differently. A writer named Montaigne said, "It's okay to know yourself and love yourself." He believed that by understanding and accepting who you are, you could live a more peaceful and happy life. 2. The meaning and essence of self-love. Let's talk about self-love in today's world. Have you ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It's like a pyramid that shows what people need to feel happy and fulfilled. At the top is something called self-actualization, which is just a fancy word for being the best version of yourself. To get there, you need to love yourself first. But self-love isn't just about feeling good all the time. There's something called self-compassion, which means being kind to yourself, especially when things go wrong. It's different from self-esteem, which is about feeling confident because of what you can do. Self-compassion is like giving yourself a big hug when you're feeling down, reminding yourself that it's okay to make mistakes. Did you know that self-love can look different depending on where you live? In some places like the United States, people focus a lot on being independent and taking care of themselves. But in other places like Japan, it's more about being part of a group and making sure everyone is happy. Both ways are important, and they show that self-love can mean different things to different people. 3. The lack of self-love and its consequences. What happens if you don't love yourself enough? Well, it can show up in lots of ways. Some people might start to feel really bad about themselves and talk down to themselves all the time. Others might try too hard to make everyone else happy, even if it means ignoring their own needs. And it's not just about feelings. Low self-love can actually affect your health. People who don't love themselves might feel more stressed out, anxious, or even sad all the time. Studies have shown that when you don't take care of yourself emotionally, it can lead to problems like depression. Relationships are super important, but if you don't love yourself, it's hard to have healthy ones. For example, if someone doesn't think they deserve love, they might stay in a bad relationship because they're afraid of being alone. Or they might depend too much on their partner to make them feel good. This can lead to lots of problems, like feeling trapped or unhappy. And it's not just romantic relationships. If you don't love yourself, it can be hard to stand up for yourself with friends or family. You might let people push you around or avoid telling them how you really feel. This can lead to misunderstandings and make relationships feel stressful instead of supportive. 4. Unhealthy self-love, narcissism, and its dark side. Now, let's talk about something that's the opposite of low self-love: narcissism. Narcissism is when someone loves themselves way too much, to the point where they think they're better than everyone else. It's like being so focused on yourself that you forget other people have feelings too. Narcissism can cause a lot of problems. People with narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD for short, might have trouble keeping friends because they're always thinking about themselves. They might also get really upset if things don't go their way. In today's world, especially with social media, it's easy to fall into the trap of unhealthy self-love. We see pictures of people who look perfect and seem to have it all. This can make us feel like we need to be perfect too. But this kind of thinking can lead to something called cultural narcissism, where people care more about how they look or what they have than who they are on the inside. When too many people start thinking this way, it can hurt our communities. People might start competing with each other instead of helping each other out. It's important to remember that real self-love isn't about being perfect, it's about being yourself. 5. The challenges of self-love. So why is self-love so hard sometimes? One reason is that society often tells us we need to look or act a certain way to be accepted. This can make it hard to love ourselves if we don't fit that mold. Think about all the ads and movies that show us what perfect looks like. It's easy to start thinking that we're not good enough if we don't look like those people. Another reason self-love is tough is because of our own thoughts. We can be our own worst critics, telling ourselves things like "I'm not smart enough" or "I'll never be as good as them." These thoughts can make it hard to believe that we deserve love and kindness. But here's the good news: there are ways to build self-love. One way is through therapy. Therapists can help us change the way we think about ourselves and teach us how to be kinder to ourselves. Another way is through mindfulness, which is just a fancy word for paying attention to the present moment. When we're mindful, we can notice our negative thoughts and gently push them away. Taking care of ourselves is also super important. This means doing things that make us feel good, like going for a walk, reading a book, or spending time with friends. When we take care of ourselves, we're showing ourselves that we're worth it. 6. The impact of lack of self-love. When we don't love ourselves, it can lead to some pretty harmful behaviors. Some people might start to hurt themselves by doing things like drinking too much or not eating enough. Others might lash out at the people around them, feeling angry or upset all the time. Lack of self-love can also lead to toxic relationships. If we don't think we deserve love, we might stay in relationships that are bad for us. We might let others treat us poorly or become too dependent on someone else to make us feel good. It's important to remember that we all deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. 7 causes of low self-love. Let's talk about where low self-love can come from. A big part of it starts in childhood. When we're young, the way our parents or caregivers treat us can shape how we see ourselves. If we're loved and supported, we're more likely to grow up loving ourselves. But if we're ignored or treated badly, it can make us feel like we're not good enough. Society and culture also play a big role. If we grow up in a place where people are always comparing themselves to each other, it can be hard to feel good about ourselves. Social media can make this even worse, as we see only the highlights of other people's lives and think we don't measure up. 8. Self-love and religion. Different religions have different views on self-love. In Christianity, for example, there's a lot of talk about loving others, but it also says we should love ourselves as well. Eastern religions like Buddhism talk about self-compassion, which is all about being kind to ourselves and others. Is self-love a sin? Sometimes people wonder if loving themselves too much is a bad thing. In some religious teachings, too much self-love can be seen as pride, which is considered a sin. But most agree that a healthy amount of self-love is good because it helps us take care of ourselves and others. 9. Can you love others without loving yourself? Here's a big question: can you love someone else if you don't love yourself? Some people think it's hard to really love others if you don't feel good about yourself first. If we don't love ourselves, we might have trouble trusting others or letting them get close to us. But this is something people have been debating for a long time. Some say it's possible to care deeply for others even if you struggle with self-love. But many agree that when we love ourselves, we're better able to give love to others because we're not relying on them to fill a void in us. 10. The dark side of self-love. Now, let's talk about the dark side of self-love. Sometimes people can cross the line from healthy self-love into something more selfish. They might start thinking they're better than everyone else, which can hurt their relationships and make them feel lonely in the long run. But self-love doesn't have to be selfish. It's all about balance. We can love ourselves while also caring about others. When we practice self-love in a healthy way, it actually makes us better friends, family members, and partners because we have more love to give. For some people, the struggle with self-love is even harder because of mental health issues like personality disorders. For example, people with borderline personality disorder might have a hard time knowing who they are, which makes it tough to love themselves. Therapy can help them learn to love themselves more and improve their relationships. 11. Self-love and personality disorders. For some people, the struggle with self-love is even harder because of mental health issues like personality disorders. For example, people with borderline personality disorder might have a hard time knowing who they are, which makes it tough to love themselves. Therapy can help them learn to love themselves more and improve their relationships. 12. Recognizing struggles with self-love. How can you tell if someone is struggling with self-love? Look for signs like negative self-talk, avoiding social situations, or staying in bad relationships. These behaviors often mean that someone isn't feeling good about themselves. 13. Recognizing healthy self-love. On the flip side, what does healthy self-love look like? People who love themselves are confident but not arrogant. They take care of themselves, set boundaries, and know when to say no. They also treat themselves with kindness, just like they would treat a good friend. 14. The relationship between self-love and self-esteem. Self-love and self-esteem are close cousins, but they're not exactly the same. Self-esteem is about feeling good about what you can do, while self-love is about accepting who you are, no matter what. Both are important, but self-love gives you a stronger foundation to build a happy life. So how can we build self-love and self-esteem together? Start by noticing the good things about yourself and celebrating them. Practice self-care, set goals, and be patient with yourself. Over time, you'll find that both your self-love and self-esteem will grow. To wrap things up, self-love is super important for living a happy, healthy life. It's not always easy, but it's worth the effort. Remember, self-love isn't about being perfect, it's about being kind to yourself and accepting who you are. So, take some time today to think about how you can practice self-love. Maybe it's doing something nice for yourself, like taking a break or spending time with someone you care about. Or maybe it's just telling yourself, I'm enough, just as I am. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a little extra self-love today. See you next time.